welcome to McGraw Historical Society, the programs that we attempt to present every year during the summer. I think that Mary and I enjoyed a good year in Florida, but you had a pretty good, nice winter up here this year. Not too much snow, and it went well. And I know that our speaker, everybody knows Mary Dexter. We don't need to, Mary's going to introduce her, but we know who you are and we love you. So thank you for coming, and thank you for your interest. That's what makes history fun. Everybody has a different interest, and it's great. I have a minutes and treasures report, and our last meeting, I guess, was in October or November, and Cindy's just going to review a couple of items and give us a quick update on our finances.
Yeah, and I got a public service announcement. We'll start with just a quick summary of the November meeting. Carl did a moment for history, and they talked about Town of Taylor trivia, and it was about the life of Lee Kibbe. We reviewed the Secretary and Treasurer's report, and it was moved and seconded to approve those reports. No correspondence, no old business. New business was basically that the membership drive had commenced and that you could take home your letter, and there was a pad to update your information if needed, and you can do that really at any time, right? Carl thanked Sharon Stevens for videotaping the meetings, and then Carl introduced Nick Esposito, and he talked about the World War II market garden and the crossing, and it was a personal connection. And refreshments were served to 32 people. And we've also been meeting, the board of directors has been meeting monthly. We had the second meeting yesterday, and it's just basically to talk about programming. At the May meeting, Carl gave us an update on the New York Central College project. Under new business, we voted to have these meetings the second Wednesday of the month. And Carl and Mary have been working on a book about McGraw, and they hope to have this available for sale at the McGraw Central School Alumni Banquet in September. We planned a historical society scavenger hunt where people went around the town during the around the block sales and looked for different architectural features, and there were some prizes awarded for that. We helped support that project financially and worked with Mrs. Nyberg, a teacher over at the school. We talked about an upgrade to the sound system and new acquisitions. While we were having this meeting, a fellow came in from Aiden's Barbershop and brought two really nice framed portraits of William Pond and his wife. So Mary's working on getting a little more information on them. And, okay. The treasurer's report up here, just a second. Oh, it's right here. The treasurer's report for the month of April, checkbook balance started with $3,690.51. Membership dues of $20 were received. For income, for expenses, $257.98 for utilities, and then the end of May, the checkbook balance was $3,452.53. I don't have anything more there, just a motion and a second.
Motion, Catherine, and seconded.
Mary?
Mary.
Okay. And then the public service announcement. I was asked to just remind people that they're going to have the health clinic that the military staff is going to provide free medical, dental, eye, and veterinary care. It's going to be at the Homer Intermediate School from July 15th to the 24th. And if you wanted more information, probably contact the county health department about that. County Planning Department.
Thank you, Cindy. Under announcements, Cindy made one for you. I also am going to share one with you. This came to us from Peterborough, which is up above Cazenovia, and they always have a Civil War enactment weekend. It's June 11th and June 12th. Making History Come Alive is this year's title. If you haven't ever been to Peterborough, you really should go there. It's an amazing little town. It is also the home of Garrett Smith, and he was a gentleman that helped support the New York Central College in McGraw, so we have a definite tie to him. But this is a good activity to go to. I'll leave it on the table, and you can look at it. Not to spend time on our finances, Cindy gave you the treasurer's report, but about 4 or 5 months ago, we started our membership renewal, and I'll just bring you up to date that the response has been tremendous, and I appreciate that. I would guess that we've taken in about $1,100, $1,150 in membership renewals and special gifts, and that's very good support that you have given to the Historical Society, and I thank you, and everybody on the board thanks you. Again, to bring you up to date, she mentioned the New York Central College. Mary and I spoke yesterday.
No,
Tuesday at Enrichment Day, and spoke about the college. The program went well, and the people, it was received well, so we had a good time doing that. Met an interesting gentleman yesterday from Charlotte, North Carolina. I think I can get his last name right. It's Greg Hekamovich. He's a Croatian man from Croatia. He's a teacher in a college at Charlotte, North Carolina. And he was working about black education, and he was in Cortland County and got in touch with us, and we spent a couple of hours with him yesterday and made some copies, and we'll make some more, and he gave us a generous donation. But I think it's good for you to know that people are in fact interested in the history that the Cortland County Historical Society and the living history of McGraw and other historical societies keep. It's being used, it's being shared. We talked about last year the fact that we were working on a documentary about the college also, and Melanie and Sharon have spent untold hours working on that this winter. Sharon traveled to Harvard University. She's thinking of becoming a student now.
I was happy to get out of there.
But she interviewed a gentleman that's at Harvard that's a student working on his PhD and writing about different colleges of black education throughout the states, and she interviewed him for his chapters that he'd done on McGraw. And Melanie is I guess I'll call her the public television program. She's responsible for public television programming at Time Warner and works at TC3. And they've done a tremendous job in putting together this documentary. I think you'll be proud of it when you see it. We have been invited by the Alumni Association to set up a little table at the alumni banquet. And they've suggested that it would be a good place for us to take the different books that we have for sale and set up on a table in the side room and sell them, and then of course that would help us with our profits. So that's going to go on in September. I would like to have a couple of people who might be willing to sit at the table and sell the books for an hour or so. Mary and I really appreciate and enjoy the opportunity to circulate and meet friends, and so I'd like to have someone else do that. If you know of anybody that wants to work at that, let me know, please. You wanted to speak about a sign-up sheet for refreshments, and why don't you introduce Mary at the same time?
I don't believe I know her.
Oh, you don't know
Oh, I guess I do. Oh, okay. There.
You're set.
I'm all set. Refreshments. I need some help. We have July, August, September, and October. And I made up a sign-up sheet like we've circulated other times. I need some help in furnishing cookies, and if there would be a couple of people who would serve, everything will be ready for you. If you're serving, you haven't got to make anything. I'll pass the clipboard, and if you would be willing to sign up, that would be a big help to me. If you think visiting a cemetery is boring, you haven't been with Mary and her sister Ann. Last fall, I think about 2 or 3 days before we were heading for Florida, Mary had called and said, I want to take you up on Shoshinsky Hill. I found the graves. I think I found the graves. I think I know where they are. So I got in the back seat of the car and off we went. And Ann kind of helped drive while Mary was really driving. And we're looking for this line of trees, and it's that way someplace. So I got out of the car, and Ann's gone on ahead. She's going one direction, and Mary's going the other direction, and I'm kind of walking through brambles and everything. You know, I'm from Norwich. And Mary turns around about halfway away, and she said, oh, I remembered one thing. There's a well here someplace. And I'm thinking, if I fall in that well, they have to call Carl. And he's not going to be a happy camper because we're heading for Florida in a couple of days. I walked right back to the road. And they found Minnie Barber. How do you pronounce it? Minnie Barber? Jabber. And who were the other two that are buried there? Are there 2 other people?
No, I just.
Just Minnie?
Just the one.
Okay. It's how would you describe it? It's you go out a field and go down a bank. Is there a little creek at the bottom?
The river.
Yeah, that's too far.
Is that too far? It's too far. Oh, it's back a ways. What do I know? But it was interesting, and it says Headstone all by itself, which is kind of sad. Do you think that was their farm?
Her farm.
Her farm?
Her brother was next door
Okay.
from census records.
But I was glad we found it because it hasn't had much attention. No, and it's good to know where it is too. So I'd like to introduce Mary, and she knows everything about headstone. She can walk in a cemetery and say, that I know who made that headstone just by the lettering or the design or whatever. So I'm glad you came to hear Mary.
I don't really think I need that. You can tell me, raise your hand if you can't hear me. But I usually can be heard. You're going to get the whole ball of wax tonight. This may be the last time around for this. The program is Coffin Man's Apprentices. But I'm going to start with Coffin Man himself as an apprentice to his father and his brother. Give me a little review of where he came from and where his images come from, and then we'll take off and look at the 2 apprentices that he trained and hired to work out of South Central New York State. Coffin Man, J.W. Stewart II, was the son of Jonas Stewart Sr., who carved gravestones for 50 years out of Claremont, New Hampshire. In the Claremont property records, there is this record of Jonas Stewart, his wife Mary Grimes, and their 10 children. You'll notice the second child is Jonas. He died. so there was no one carrying his name. The next son is James. James Grimes, named after his mother. And the next one is Jonas Stewart II, not Junior, but second. And he is our Coffin Man here in South Central New York State. The Stewarts worked out of Claremont, New Hampshire, which is on the New Hampshire-Vermont border. Claremont is here. I use colors to denote who the carvers are to help you keep track of who's who and where. This is the father, and all the orange are the cemeteries he worked in, initially on both sides of the river, but by 1800, 1810, more carvers came in, so he stayed in Claremont, actually moved over into East Claremont and continued the rest of his 30 years carving here. But in that same period, with these other carvers coming into the area, his son, James Grimes Stewart, moved north to Cabot, Vermont, where he carved and died in 1814, a fairly young man. This is our Jonas Stewart II, our Coffin Man. He carved in this valley, White River Valley, in Vermont. He placed some stones in New Hampshire, but predominantly he was over here, and he was not competing with his father. This is what Jonas Stewart Sr.'s initial 20 years of carving looked like. His tympanum, the top of the gravestone, was like a pumpkin head in a halo with pots on either side that had flowers. And the eye treatment was with multiple eye lines. Now, I will point out from here on, you'll notice the eyes with the multiple eye lines. That's the only feature that actually goes from one carver to the next. Jonas got rid of the halo. He moved the head up off the line. He started putting wings on his head, faces, and some of them had bodies. He still had little flower pots on the side. And at one point he put his heads in wings or attached to wings. The brother, James Grimes Stewart, is very creative. His tympanums have a variety of images that his brother brought to Central New York. Here we have a portrait with an acanthus flower, some clouds, flowers. Here we have what we call a bottle cap base. Again, you'll notice these eye lines extra here. Here we have a patriot. This is Israel Richardson's stone, and he's made not only the portrait, but he's put a coat on him with buttons and ruffles and a flower in his cap. And that, he felt at the time, 1800, people in northern Vermont and New Hampshire weren't sure what was happening. Ermine willow was coming in. So he felt that this needed to be identified. He has 3 different stones spread out in Vermont that have an urn at the bottom. They all look different, but he made sure that people knew what he was carving. And this is our Coffin Man. He's in New Hampshire. This is in Claremont. This is Jonas Stewart II and the work he did in Claremont. The abstract urns that he did. He did a portrait over in Vermont that looked like this, and I'll call your attention to this. You're going to see another one here in New York State, but this one's in Vermont. The mask guy, the mask guy, the hair with the jeweled, holding up the back of the long hair, the ruffle on the vest. Remember this particular image. We'll see it here in New York State. Again, the mask guy, and this is Jonas Stewart II, our Coffin Man. He also used this face in Vermont and New Hampshire. He's picked the face up and put it up in the tympanum, and he's put it in cradled by wings with a little bit of wavy hair on the top, but still the mask eye feature here. Remember this image from Vermont, you're going to see it later. From there we bring Jonas Stewart II, our Coffin Man, down into South Central New York. About 1810, it appears that he left the Vermont area and came into South Central New York to a place called Coventryville. It's in the south end of Shenango Valley, the Shenango County, excuse me. And he covered a very large area over a period of 10 years. There are coffins with small, thumbnail size, but still a mask eye face and nose. Yeah, okay. This is in Ithaca. Here we have a coffin, again with the mask eye face and nose in Ithaca. These are all Coffin Man images. His urns were abstract. He didn't do many that you would immediately look at and say, oh, that's an urn for ashes or something like that. His urns were all in an abstract fashion. His willow looks a little bulky, but actually this comes from his father's work in New Hampshire. Couldn't quite figure this out when I saw it, what was going on here, but I saw that image in New Hampshire in his father's work. So he has a few of these stones in New York. In half of his stones, approximately half of his stones have vertical coffins below the inscription. So I called him Coffin Man. That's where the name comes from. Now, in looking at gravestone carvers, we can tell who they are and collect an inventory by their inscription, more so than their images on the top of the stones. Their inscriptions are like your handwriting is different from my handwriting. Every gravestone carver's inscriptions were different. This is Jonas Stewart II, Coffin Man's inscription. Lightly carved, but keep in mind, the stone is 200 years old, and it's still very crisp, very, very smooth and very crisp lettering. Now let me point out a couple of things that he did with his lettering. Some stones had the stone say "in memory of," which was appropriate for the time, but he also used "here lies," which is an archaic form, back to his father's form. The letters that stop on the line have a little foot that sticks up, 45-degree foot that sticks up. His ampersand is a U form with the left leg curving in. You'll notice the other carvers that I'm going to talk about had different ampersands. He used a rolled D at the end of die. He quite often used ligatures, as in CT and ST, and placed them over a single dot. That's different than the other carvers. AET is an abbreviation, either AE or AET, for the Latin word aetatis, A-E-T-A-T-I-S, and most carvers abbreviated that. Our Coffin Man wanted to put years, months, and dates. And you'll see these on his stones. He carved this area from 1811 to 1822. We're not sure at the beginning date, but it's around 1810, although he doesn't appear in the 1810 census, so he may have come a little later that year, or 1811. But we do know that he stopped carving in 1822, and I will share that with you later. You'll notice the carving area goes from almost Cooperstown to Ithaca and up in Madison County all the way down into Hartford, Pennsylvania. That's a lot of territory in the second decade of the 19th century. These are some of the images he brought with him from Vermont. The half moon with the face and the little mask eye, 7 stars of the Pleiades, the God's eye. Mr. Edict happened to be a very high-ranking Mason, so all of this stone has multiple Masonic images on it. These 2 faces, I walked in the cemetery and walked up to the back of this stone, and when I walked around to the front, I was fully expecting to see urns, and urns did not appear. These 2 faces stared back at me. It was quite a surprise. Maybe they were surprised to see me, I don't know. But the mask eye feature and the hair is, again, what was brought with him from Vermont.
So he made his own. He didn't ask people, he designed his own, or did he ask the people what they wanted on it? Or did he just do
Well,
whatever he wanted?
he brought these images with him, probably
Oh,
had
they
a
picked them
notebook
out.
with things, and we know his.
Okay, no.
That's okay. Anyone who, if someone has a question as I'm talking, it's probably better if I address the question then, so we know what we're talking about. These are images that came with him from his father and his brother, and he brought them.
Okay.
So they're not a lot of them. I think probably less than 7% of all the stones he carved had these special images. The rest of them were urn and willow. Do you remember me talking about the portrait of the woman in Vermont with the mask eye, with the turned up hair, with the jewel in the back, with the ruffle on the front? This wonderful, lovely stone is over in Ithaca, in the King Cemetery at the top of the hill. I rescued, you can see, this is all being hit and run over by a mower. So I grabbed the stone and stood it up on a nearby boulder that was not too far. Drew a map and how many feet I moved it from where the grave was, but I felt that it had to be moved from where it was or it was going to be in a lot more trouble. But this is our Coffin Man, again, Mr. Stewart, Jonas Stewart II. And here we have his, if you really want to know, it's from Decatur to Ithaca, Milford, Pennsylvania, all the way up to Otselic. Just a really great territory. And you can imagine the numbers of people that we're going to require and need gravestones in the 2nd and 3rd century, decade of the 19th century, excuse me. This quarry stands 1/4 of a mile south of Coventryville in southern Shenango County, and this is where many, probably most of Jonas Stewart II's inventory came from out of here, and his early apprentices used this, but later the apprentices went and used other quarries. But this one is very close to Coventryville and was very handy, and it probably had something to do with his settling in Coventryville. I don't know why he went there exactly, other than maybe somebody told him that the quarry was available and stones were needed. Here we have, over in near Windsor, the small face supported by the wings. In Sydney, New York, a little bit larger. Again, the mask eye face, that big Kilroy nose. And again, the wings have been pulled up to the ear position. Let me review here just a minute. This is Jonas Stewart II. Here he's used "Here Lies," the little foot that goes up from the letters that stop on the line, the U form ampersand. His Y is usually tucked up right into the line, the rolled D at the end. He raced for abbreviations over a single dot. The number 5 is particularly well identified because it is detached and has a backward comma. And so anytime we have a 5 on the stone, we know it's his. We have AET, at the age of. That's, by the way, I think I didn't say that that was what it was. Aetatis in Latin is at the age of or of an age. Then we have year, month, and day, which is the form he used on so many of his stones. Now, in the Oxford Gazette, in February of 1824, there was an article about the town of Coventry and what had been reported in the 1820 census that was happening in the town of Coventry, population-wise, manufacturing-wise, commerce. And part of it said that the quarries were excellent building stones, but that considerable quantities had been brought into monuments for burial grounds, disposed of in New York and in Pennsylvania. The stone does not admit a high polish, but it can be made tolerably smooth. And one of the places in that particular town is Miles Four Corners, which later became Coventryville, which later became the center of these carvers. I spent 23 years gathering an inventory of Jonas Stewart II's stones. Anytime I had an adult male, I went to the county clerk's office in the county where the stone was found and looked to see if the adult male had probate. If he had probate, did they pay the bills? If the bills were paid, did they pay for a gravestone? And if they paid for a gravestone, did they tell you who they paid? That was what I was looking for to identify Coffin Man. So in 23 years, Simon Jones died in 1818. He had a pair of gravestones. Pair meaning headstone and footstone. Pair of gravestones, and they paid J.W. Stewart. And that's when I knew who our Coffin Man was. And so everything then backed up into New England, and so you're really getting the story from the top down. I was doing my research from the bottom back up. But now we know who we're dealing with, J.W. Stewart. This is the 1820 census. He appears in the 6th line down, right under Burridge. The name is Miles, not Mills. J.W. Stewart, Burridge Miles. Burridge Miles built a hotel at Coventryville in 1811. And with this name appearing directly under it, I would say, since J.W. Stewart did not own any property in any county where I found his work, I am assuming that he was living at the hotel and doing work out of Coventryville from there.
So he never married?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I said, did he ever marry?
I have no way of knowing. I'll tell you, in the census, there is a woman, he is 45.
Oh.
There is a woman, 25, living in the way the census is, there's no names. His name is there, but you don't know who the other people are who are living there. So I don't know who the 25-year-old was, whether she was a wife, or whether she was a daughter, or whether she was just somebody else living in the hotel in the same area. Thank you for asking. So we had him coming into central New York and putting out a whole raft of stones with a whole raft of images. Okay. We're working out of Coventryville and going in all directions, coming and going back into here. And this is a turnpike. This is the Catskill-Speedsville Turnpike, went right through Coventryville, so we had some room. Although I have to say, in 1815, I don't imagine a dirt turnpike was any great means of travel. Most of the turnpikes had the trees cut down and the roots pulled out, so they left big holes with water in them most of the time, from what I've read. This is Coventryville, and there are a great many sandstone stones in this cemetery. If you visit there, you will find all of the carvers that I'm going to talk about tonight from here on out. This is Finch Mound on Route 26. This is probably the last stone that Jonas Stewart II carved. And the reason I think so is, the date is she died. This is Sally Finch. She died April 1821. There are only 2 stones with that date. Jonas Stewart II stopped carving in 1822 because he was arrested. On July 31st of 1822, Jonas W. Stewart was taken on a warrant and taken before Judge Waters in Coventryville, and that's the last I heard of him. We don't know what he was arrested for. We don't know what the sentence was, but he definitely left town, and I've never been able to find him since. I have no idea where he went or why. He had a large family, brothers, sisters, nephews, but he doesn't seem to be connected to any of them. He's just gone in 1822.
Did you surmise that he could have gone back to Vermont?
He could have, but he's not, he doesn't show up in any records there. His father was still carving. His father carved until 1823, and then his father went to Cabot, Vermont. He left to Claremont and died 2 years later. And there are no Coffin Man, no Jonas Stewart II stones in Vermont or New Hampshire or in any place I've searched in New York State. So I don't know where he went after this. He's gone. But while he was in Coventryville, work was good. He had a lot of work to do, and so he found it necessary to train 2 carvers. And we will look at Coffin Man's apprentices now. This is the territory that we're talking about in south central New York State. The green dots are Coffin Man, Stewart. The blue dots are Eclectic Man. And the red dots are the open urn carver. They worked out of Coventryville. Now let me just take one little quick aside here. This is a picture of William Stewart. He's the son of Alfonso Stewart. He was Jonas Stewart II's brother. This is his nephew, who lived in Ohio. His father, Alphonse Stewart, was not a gravestone carver. He was a lawyer. He went to Dartmouth. Graduated in 1915, went to Athens, Pennsylvania, got married to a widow. She and he left and went to Illinois in 1818. They had 2 children. This is one of the children. I just thought that it was interesting to see a picture of someone we might be looking at that might look like our carvers of the time. And one thing I can tell you about his father, got into an argument over a horse. They decided to settle the matter with a duel. The seconds and Alphonse Stewart decided it would be better if it was just a sham duel. It wasn't worth fighting over a horse. So they walked it off with their guns, and the other guy either didn't get the message or really wanted the horse. He had put a shell in his gun, and he fired one shot and killed Alphonse Stewart in 1918 in Belleville, Illinois. It's in all the newspapers all over the country because the other man, Mr. Bennett, was promptly arrested, tried, found guilty, and he was hung. Just an aside in here, I just love the stories that come up with these. And if you are looking at gravestones and you want to, they're dark and you need some light on them, use a mirror, take the reflected light and throw across the stone and take a picture of it like that. It's just one of the tricks of the trade. Now, here are the years, 1810 to 1822. This is Stewart, and you can see his inventory getting larger and larger and larger and larger until here he's looking at 20 to 25, 50 stones here. That's a lot of stones to carve. So it's in this area right here that he looks to hire a couple of apprentices. Eclectic Man in here. Here's 1822, he's done. All the stones are carved after that date out to here by Eclectic Man, and all the stones here are carved out to by Opener. That's pretty much why I think these two apprentices appeared right in this area right here. Okay. Eclectic Man. His inscriptions are quite deeply carved, not like Stewart's. Stewart is very finely carved. Both his apprentices carved deeply, and Eclectic Man carved deeply, and he liked very much to do what I call flecking these letters to make them stand out. He's in the blue area here. Once Stewart was gone and the green dropped off, the Eclectic Man went this way, up into Tompkins County and Cayuga County, and the other carver dropped down into Pennsylvania. But we're going to look at the stones that were carved by Eclectic Man. He went over here from Virgil, and all of this area here, all of these cemeteries here, all the way up to Venice and Venice Center, Cayuga County, Tompkins County, have stones by this very creative carver. Early stuff is really hard to figure out. This is what's in Coventryville when he's trying to get these guys to carve the way he wants them to carve. So sometimes you see roll D, sometimes you see two dots under the line, sometimes the two is a kneeling one. I'm confused as to which one of the two apprentices did this. But I'm pretty sure that Eclectic Man did this, partly because you'll see the zigzag up, down. It's interesting. Stewart did a very tight zigzag, very tight. It's like a chopping line. This carver did a medium open. You can actually see the up and down motion. There's no crowding of it. And the other carver, his look like W's. But so I feel that this is with the medium zigzag, the fact that he used a shield, which is very common to Eclectic Man. And there are different things in the lettering that point to his, can you see this ampersand here and here? It's a U ampersand, like Coffin Man's, but the left arm is straight up and flat topped. Again, to look like, these are small stones to look like Stewart that Eclectic Man is doing. He's learning how to carve. Again, we have a small stone. Stewart stones were mostly 3.5 feet high. But, and initially, his apprentices also did those small stones with stone out of that quarry, like this one. Again, just to learn how to carve. This is in 1823. This is kind of late. Stewart is gone, and we have Eclectic Man, who's now really got a handle on a chisel and a mallet. By the way, the chisels were steel, the mallets were wood. And this is the form that he used, Eclectic Man used. But you'll notice that his coffins are horizontal, and they have the tree falling in front instead of behind. So you will see this form, it helps to identify him. His stones, he didn't leave much room for anything extra in his stones. He liked to fill them up with artwork and inscriptions. Here, it's very rare that Eclectic Man used these mask eye faces, but this particular stone for these children is in Lisle in Broome County. Again, we have, I can identify this, you can see the flecking on here, different things that then tell me that this is a vine with leaves. It's what he did. This is the package. When you ordered a stone from Eclectic Man, this is what you got. Again, he didn't do these spaces. These spaces belong to the Coffin Man, but he helped out. It was told to do the lettering for this stone. He liked putting parts of his inscription in shields or bracketed. There's a name for it, and I can't for the life of me think of what I want to call that, but they're like this. And this happens to be raised. He does a lot of this. That particular stone had a footstone. And this footstone, when I first saw it, was under a tree. And I had a flashlight with me, and I was looking at it and going, that's Phoebe Hill, but what is that up there in this? So we waited till the tree died and we could move it. It's a small trumpeting angel. Eclectic Man liked his trumpeting angels. He used this, it's an eternity sign. Again, another fully engraved stone, horizontal, with the tree falling on the top. There's flowers down here in the base. He just didn't like leaving much space in there. Now this stone is his top of the line. This is I think most of you have looked at it over here too. This is a trumpeting angel at a tomb. This particular wedding was done by Dr. Cummins' wife, Ruth Cummins, years ago when she knew what I was doing and what I was looking at. She brought this, it was all rolled up in the trunk of her car, and she brought it in. She says, "Is this your carver?" And I go, "Wow." Yes, indeed. This hasn't been painted on. This is computer enhancement on the color here, but I wanted to give you a real close look at that angel. There's a half mask. We've got the wavy hair. We've got lines in the wings. We've got striations in the body. We've got toes on the feet. Now, as lovely as this is, you can't tell me that this carver, Eclectic Man, in Cayuga County, in New York State, has not seen this stone, with this eye, with these wings, with these striations, with these feet. This is Jonas Stewart senior in Windsor, Vermont. So there has to be a connection between that eclectic man Carver and the Stewarts. Okay. This is what happened, was hit by buckshot from a shotgun and probably hit by a lawnmower a couple of times. The face fell off. This is the angel stone. I put broken pieces behind the stone in the summer of 2009, and this spring, everything's gone. The pieces, the backing, everything. I've made inquiries. I can't find anybody who knows what happened to it or where it is. It's repairable if we can find the pieces, but we don't know where they are. This stone showed up in Portland, in the city. They were digging on Greenbush Street to put an addition on a house. And this stone by eclectic man came up. You can see the horizontal coffin down here with the trees on the outside. Again, a shield. We're just going to move through these rather steadily. These are all eclectic man. Lacking the zigzag, the tight here, the corners, the Masonic symbols, the brickwork. He was good. He was big on brickwork. Here's another interesting top, another stone with an interesting top. This is in the same cemetery that the Trumpeting Angel is. This is a woman with long hair weeping at the tomb of her two teenage daughters, the Anderson stone. That still has a face on it. This is in Asbury, again in, this is Tompkins County. He liked to do what I call peanut flowers. He just, bricks, keystone in the arch, outline on letters. This stone is as wide as it is high. We have a broken tree. We've got the columns, the arches, the corners, the brickwork, more trees. Then, I love the name, Gad Pease. Got this gravestone. It's over in Delaware County. It's a tomb with a urn on the top. Engraved "O Memento Mori," which means remember death. This boy, age 21, drowned in the, since it's in Lyle, he probably drowned in the Tioga or Chemung River. Eclectic man did birds. This one is way over in Andes, New York. Lettering comparisons that I do. Remember I told you that this left side of the U was different? Now, first we have to move the snakes out of the way to find a treasure. This is what this stone looks like. We have an early picture taken by Frank Place at the Historical Society, and it had a coffin in here. We haven't found that piece to go in there yet. But as you can see, the base has a two-masted brigantine, a tree, a bird with greenery in its beak. Shadrach Terry was involved in the Suffolk County Long Island Sound area during the Revolutionary War. He was a captain of the ship at that time, and he was part of, according to what's at the Historical Society, Shadrach Terry was part of General Washington's spy group that worked out of Suffolk County in Long Island and traveled by ship across over into Connecticut. So he was involved with that, but he has been laid to rest on the mound behind a farm in the town of Marathon. Another angel in Andes, New York. Another bird down in Windsor. And we're going to finish off here. We can see he's got a vine, he's got everything inside this circle, and another circle down here. The one thing he put in this that he didn't do in all of them, put roots on his trees quite often. He took the time to chisel some roots on the base of those trees. We have a sun with a moon and the 7 stars of the Pleiades. Now, this is my EP puzzle. This stone is in Dryden. There are several of his stones in Dryden. At the base of this stone is this small inscription right here, EP. Now, it certainly does make sense since the woman's name is Eliza Pierce. So he carved EP here. I'm going to mention another stone when I do the other carver right along here in a minute. Remember EP. Want to clean a gravestone? There's something new. It's called D2 with water. Put it on the stone, go back the next day with water, clean it off. You get that. Okay.
A lot of elbow grease though.
Yeah, and some elbow grease on it. This is probably Eclectic Man's last stone, way back in the woods. It's a Van Nortwick cemetery, and I was about 3 steps from turning around and leaving because I thought I was in the wrong woods in the wrong place, but it was there. This is probably his last stone. He did do a bunch of stones where he put the top on, but somebody else did the bottom. Way over in Kelloggsville, there's a cemetery, the Jane Cemetery. Was that carved yesterday? It's so new and beautiful. I have no idea how to comment on that or what it means. There are 2 stones just looking very much like this, like they were done yesterday. Open urn. Won't take a lot of your time. We're just going to look at pictures here. All of his stones are in this area, along the river. Again, he had stones, it told us they were in Pennsylvania. I just didn't know how far and how deep. I called him open urn because in Cincinnatus, the first 2 stones I saw there had open urns. That was a mistake. His early stones started like this. They were small. Again, questionable who of the apprentices carved that. This is early open urn. Coventryville, early open urn. He did these letters down here. He's trying to get a handle on what's going on and what's expected of him by Stewart. Big ampersand. He also has the mask eye faces. These are in Pennsylvania. They were passed along to him by Stewart from his father, from his brother. These are open urn stones. See the very large entry to the S and the large tail to the S? That's something that he did a lot. It helps to make him stand out. A few more of these small faces. Now he's getting a hang of it. His lettering was getting better, his spacing was getting better. His tops are getting better and big. wants big tops. These letters all fall within his inventory. And he is finally getting around to where he's doing the work that he was hired to do as an apprentice. And with this stone, in 1821, an apprentice is about to launch his own new style. Deep, very deep lettering, very deep lettering. Double button tube, used a lot. He found himself a new quarry. This is not out of the quarry that's near Coventryville. This is a new quarry somewhere, probably, we think, in the southern tier. But we no longer have what we call open urns. We now have. He wanted fully large, decorated open urns. He wanted, didn't want them open anymore. He wanted to fill them up. He had his own bird. He liked it. He had a bird of his own down in Pennsylvania. He did some cursive lettering. This is, if you want to look at, if you happen to be out, if you know where Laceyville is in Pennsylvania, this is the Lacey family in the Lacey Cemetery on Lacey Road. All of these stones. Is that not a knockout? More Pennsylvania stones have showed up lately. They're large. These stones we're looking at are this tall. We're not talking about 3-foot stones anymore. We're talking about 4.5, 5 feet tall. How he shipped them, how he got them there, how he got them stood up it's just mind-boggling. The numbers we're coming up with is quite surprising. These were all carved between 1822 and 1827, 8. This is over in Sydney. It's a tomb. People say, oh, it's a pretty church. No, it's a tomb. It's a tomb with the deceased remembered in flowers. Remember when I told you the zigzag, how the zigzag was different for him? It's very wide open. It helps to identify him as opposed to eclectic bands like this and coffin mans like that. This is a very tall stone. In the woods, it's beautiful. This is Edward Platt. He lived near Nichols, New York. Give me the next one, Kate. EP on the stone, carved in the top of the stone. We have EP again. Edward Platt, of course. What if I told you that I have an inventory of 600 stones, and EP in 2 stones are the only stones of the 600 that have it on the gravestone. I expect it on a footstone. But why on the gravestone? Why just 2? And why EP? Is he trying to tell me something? Are they his initials? Are they the carver's initials? And he thought, this is a great place to put my initials. Haven't figured it out yet. His interpretation of a willow is smashing. He carves deeply so that it's easy to do the metal rubbings. He had his own bird. This rooster is in Smithville Flats.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, we couldn't find it.
Is it in the first one or the second one?
Way
The old
Yeah,
one.
the one,
Across from the post office.
the one in town, the one
Oh,
right
the one in town.
in town behind the bar.
Maybe I'm looking for it.
That's where we were.
It's all the way in the back.
Library,
Okay,
2 rows from the back. It's a little stone.
Mary, would they have taken the stone and do that on site, or did they usually take it to their
use
work?
Mary? Did you hear the question? Question.
Did they ever take the stone to the site where it was going to be and then carve it? Or did,
could have. What I think probably happened was this was carved maybe during the winter
okay.
on stones. And then when he had a couple that were inscribed that had to go in a certain direction, he had extra in the wagon and would take the time to inscribe something on them. But as a rule, if you ordered a stone, it was at least 2 years before you ever saw it. When you think of them working out of Coventryville, they could spend a whole summer going in one direction. You know, putting stones in and doing things and going in another, the next year going in another. There certainly wasn't going up and down the road 2 different ways.
And you said it only cost like $2, right? Or $5?
No.
How much was it for them to do that? Like what they charge?
The cost? Probably $5.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's the smaller ones are 5. I don't know. I've never found a payment for one of these, so I don't know. Okay. This is huge. This stone, this tall. We get genealogy on this. Tells where they came from in England, how long they lived there, wife and. Little bit of a story. This is Dr. Wheeler. He's in Whitney Point. The stone is in Whitney Point. He grew up in Dutchess County. His father was a wheelwright and also did carved grist mill stones for a run of stones. So this man could carve grist mill, but he also went to school to be a physician. And his family has the paperwork that names him as a doctor in the late 1700s. He packed up and came to Binghamton, New York, where he doctored people in Binghamton in the first decade of the 19th century, anywhere between 1800 and 1810. Then he moved up into Whitney Point and Lisle and was involved in the religious organizations and the politics of the day, and a physician. There was an influenza epidemic in 1812 and 13, and he lost a lot of his family. This is written up on, find the grave on the thing. He lost a lot of his patients, and it bothered him a great deal. And sometime in the next 10 years, his son died, and that really did him in. He was very depressed. And in May of 1823, at the age of 54, he hung himself in the barn. But his son had this stone put up. I'm hoping I can find the probate. I haven't been successful yet, but there's probate out there someday to see if they paid this, who the carver is. Wouldn't I love to know who this carver is? Back in Coventryville, he was still doing work, and I think he stayed there. Opener and stayed in Coventryville. He worked out there. Can't speak to this. This maybe is like, this is Anna Sherwood, Upper Lisle, maybe the last stone of this type. He did put one down in Pennsylvania. Between 1826 and 1834, there are no stones that we can find. But he did carve this for Mr. Burge in 1834 in Coventry. And then he may have carved, he obviously carved the top in this part. I don't know whether he carved the bottom of this in 1838. So Opener and Man was around for a good many years. And my only problem with the DAR is they shouldn't have done that to a piece of an early American sculpture and put that plaque on top of a nice piece of work. Have we answered the questions? Have we got anything else? I know it was an awful lot of pictures, an awful lot of information, but like I said, I'm finished. I'm done.
The size of the stones, I think most people here can be amazed to know that when you're describing, they started out at 3 feet tall and some are like 4.5 and 5 feet tall, and they're 200 years old, and the reason that the ground hasn't heaved them over is because there's probably as much in the ground as there is out of the ground.
Yeah,
So if you're looking at a 5-foot stone,
a great deal.
Other questions for Mary?
We got more than we thought we were gonna do.
I forgot to mention that next month's program is going to be on, excuse me, on the salt mines over at Cayuga Lake. I think she's going to talk about Cargill, if that's correct pronunciation. Louise Beeman, and she's been a historian since 1970s, so I'm sure she knows a lot about Lansing in that area. So that should be an interesting program. Let's see, that's July. August is up in the air so far. I haven't heard back from the lady. So I'll tell you next month what August is going to be about.
We certainly thank you very much, Mary, for coming down and sharing with us and a very, very in-depth study of gravestones. And we appreciate your knowledge and we appreciate your sharing it. Thank you. Enjoy.